Good afternoon, and thank you for attending the Office of Emergency Programs office hours on the annual data collection for ESSER funds. The purpose of this office hours session is to answer any questions districts may have regarding year 2 of the ESSER annual performance review data collection. This presentation will go through the reporting requirements, selected definitions from year 2 of the data dictionary, and questions the OEP has already received. To begin, all entities that receive ESSER funds must participate in the annual performance report. There are 4 surveys to complete on ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ARP ESSER, and cross-act information. The surveys are due on Monday, May 16th, 2022. With year 1 of the ESSER annual report, it was structured to follow the federal fiscal year. However, with the year 2 report and all reports moving forward, the USED has chosen to align their reports with the different state fiscal years. Keeping this in mind, the CARES survey will begin on October 1, 2020, which is where year 1 of the annual report left off, and close on June 30th, 2021, which is the end of the state fiscal year. CRSA and ARP begin on the day either piece of legislation was signed into law through the close of the state fiscal year on June 30th, 2021. The cross-act information, however, will cover the entire period beginning in October of 2020 to the close of the state fiscal year in 2021. The Office of Elementary and Secondary Education is also providing some training on the annual report. On May 4th, they are providing a webinar that will review some definitions from the data dictionary. On May 5th, they are providing a webinar that gives a general overview of the annual report for LEAs. And on May 17th, they are providing a technical assistance webinar for SEAs on inputting the data collected. Now we can jump into the data dictionary. Beginning with awarded. Funds are awarded when an SEA makes a subgrant to an LEA or enters into a subgrant or contract with a subrecipient receiving funds from the SEA reserve. Expended refers to the spending of any subgrant funds, and specifically for the purpose of this data collection, refers to any reimbursements that are made in the period this report reflects. The American Rescue Plan Act defines evidence-based as any activity, strategy, or intervention that either shows a rationale based on high-quality research or a positive policy evaluation that they are likely to improve student outcomes or other relevant outcomes, or demonstrates a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes or other relevant outcomes. This could be demonstrated by strong evidence from at least one experimental study, moderate evidence from at least one quasi-experimental study, or promising evidence from at least one correlational study with statistical controls in place. Additionally, given the novel context of the coronavirus pandemic, evidence does not need to have been generated during the pandemic to be considered evidence-based for the purpose of this report. An entity's planned use of funds refers to the intended purpose of any funds that remain after what was reported as expended during the period this report reflects. Remaining funds are defined as the balance remaining after all expenditures made during the reporting period have been subtracted from the total award. The SEA Reserve Fund refers to the 10% or less an SEA may reserve from the total award for each of the ESSER grants to address emergency needs brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. For the purpose of this report, subgrantees should only answer questions regarding the state reserve funds if they received an additional subgrant for any ESSER grant from the state reserve outside of the mandatory subgrant. A qualified educator for the purpose of this report is any educator that has met all requirements for state licensure or certification in the area they are assigned to teach. And a full-service community school refers to any public elementary or secondary school that participates in community-based efforts to coordinate and integrate educational development, family, health, and other services through partnerships with public or private community-based organizations. So those are a few of the definitions the OEP has chosen to highlight from the data dictionary. And now we can move into questions received from districts with the registration link. The first question is on the difference between mandatory and reserve amounts. The mandatory subgrant award refers to the 90% of our funds allocated directly to districts. The reserve amounts refer to any additional allocation received from the 10% state reserve set aside. The majority of LEAs did not receive reserve amounts from the 10% state reserve set aside, so this does not apply to everyone. Will an outline or list of needed information be provided so that it can be gathered prior to the start of entering the data? Yes, the OEP is in the process of creating a master document to send out with the recording of this presentation. We'll include all the questions asked on the data collection forms for you to peruse while gathering the information. Are we asking for actual spending information or planned expenses for the spending of ESSER grant funds? So we're asking for both. Questions that refer to the amount expended are asking for actual spending during the reporting period. Questions that refer to planned use of funds are asking how districts plan on using their remaining funds. How should LEAs report on equitable services to non-public schools provided with CARES funds? So this question only refers to ESSER 1 funds. And with the year 1 report, LEAs were asked to report the equitable services as separate expenditures for public and non-public schools. However, this year, LEAs that provided services to non-public schools will include those activities and expenditures with the rest of the activities and expenditures. So previously, you were asked to report them separately, and with this year, you'll be reporting them together. So what is considered the prior reporting period or the reporting period for year 1 of the annual report? The reporting period for year 1 is from March 13th, 2020 to September 30th, 2020. As a reminder, here is the reporting period for year 2 of the annual report. All reporting periods end with the close of the state fiscal year on June 30th, 2021. Are we to include expenditures in expended categories if they were received after June 30th? No, funds submitted in gaps and received before June 30th will be reported as expenditures, but funds submitted in gaps and received after June 30th will be reported as planned uses of funds. Does our report have to balance with gaps? No, the data for the annual report is not required to match gaps for that period of time. Here are some links to the data collection forms. They have been sent to you via email, but they can also be accessed from the PowerPoint. There's one for ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and the ESSER data collection form, which is the cross-act information. It will ask for FTE information, student demographic information, and more details on interventions used with ESSER funds. Thank you for your time. If you have any more questions, please reach out to your assigned program coordinator or email scesser@ed.sc.gov. Thank you.